40-year-old Christian, and I'm sitting back, not saying anything. I'm just looking around. I'll tell you what I was thinking. Um, Luke died in, yeah, my oldest son is Luke, named after Becky's youngest brother, Luke. Luke died in April, and we got married in May. So I'm sitting back thinking, am I going to get married? Selfish. Um, but I'm just watching this whole thing, and I'm like, I've never seen anything like this. Like, to watch people come together as a family like this is, when it's done right. It's not good that it happened, but it's good to watch it happen. So another one that I think about all of the time, this church kind of reminds me in some ways of the layout, the way that we're all sitting, it kind of reminds me of this situation. When Becky and I were pregnant, Becky was pregnant with our third daughter, and it was our 20-week appointment, and we were going, and this was the big one, this is where you do the sonogram and you find out if you're going to have a boy or a girl, right? And it's the third baby, so it's not the first rodeo for us. And so Becky's laying there, and the lady's doing the thing, and she's looking and looking and looking, and it's taking a long time. And Becky is much sharper than I am, and she just started crying. And I was like, what's wrong? And the nurse looks over, and she's like, what's going on? And Becky said, there's something wrong, isn't there? She figured it out faster than me. And the nurse said, I think I need to go and get the doctor. And the doctor came in, and the doctor looked and all this, and that's where they said, hey, your baby's alive, but she's going to have spina bifida. She is a girl. She's going to have spina bifida. I never even heard of spina bifida. So I'm like, what a horrible thing to be like, that sounds bad. I don't know what this is. And so we left that appointment, and we went to the parking lot, and we sat in the car and cried. And it took a little while to pull ourselves together. And this was Wednesday. And the conversation on the way home that night was, I do not want to go to church tonight. I mean, I think most people would do that, but I'm teaching class. Like, if I don't go, I'm going to say, hey, you've got an hour until Bible class. Would you teach for me? That's not cool. So we went to church that night, and I stood up, and I started, and I said, okay, so we're having a girl, and there's a problem. We still didn't know anything about it at this point. I said, there's a problem, and this is why I'm telling you this story. There was a lady in the back named Doris, right about where Yoda's sitting. Back row on that side, about that far in on the seat. And I said, we're having a girl, but there's a problem. And Doris went, oh no! And I laughed out loud. Like, it was like, I mean, it's the thing where you cry and laugh at the same time. But here's the thing about Doris when that happened. That was sincere. Like, we told her we have this problem in our life, and I know that she felt every bit of pain that we felt on that day. I can hear her wail in my ears. Oh no! And it means a lot, I hate doing things like this. But that we can do them together as a family, I think is a game changer. Should be the game changer. Let's do this. Hebrews chapter 10. I'm almost to number 1. I've got 2 things for you tonight. I'm almost to where I want to talk about that. Excuse me. Hebrews chapter 10, I'm going to start reading verse 32 in a second. But before I do, I want to tell you about a situation that happened in the first century church. In the first century church, there is a group of people that are called confessors. It's not a Bible word. It's what history has referred to this group of people as. A martyr, you know what a martyr is? A martyr is somebody who has died for their faith. A confessor is somebody who is likely going to be killed for their faith, but they haven't died yet. So a confessor is somebody suffering for their faith, but they're not a martyr. And so whenever you think about a confessor, somebody who has been arrested, and they personally are sitting in jail, but also their family is suffering the consequences for public shame and maybe physical consequences also. Listen to this description. To survive in a Roman prison, a person had to depend on his family. He had to depend on his family to bring in the necessities of food and clothing so he could stay alive long enough to face his accusers. And then this is why I'm reading this. For the Christians, the church was their family. So I'm suffering for my faith, and my only hope of survival in the midst of my suffering is that you all are going to step up and take care of me, and likely going to take care of my family. And that brings me to Hebrews chapter 10 and verses 32 through 34. Those are the circumstances that these verses are written inside of. Hebrews 10:32. But recall the former days when, after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings. And then this verse is something that, if you highlight in your Bibles, I would highlight a part of this verse. This means a lot to me. You endured a hard struggle with suffering, 33. Sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and then this is the one I highlight. And sometimes being partners with those so treated. Isn't that a cool verse? Sometimes it's my turn to walk through the fire, and sometimes it's your turn to walk through the fire. And when it's your turn, I'm not the guy who's suffering, but I'm going to suffer with you. Sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession, an abiding one. And I think that's probably good to make the point, but since we're close, for me, I just turned the page 2 times. Hebrews chapter 13. It's the same conversation, and we'll just read it since we're here already. Hebrews 13 and verse 3. Remember those who are in prison, as though in prison with them. That's what we're talking about. It's Doris going, oh no! She wasn't suffering because of her kids. She was suffering because she's a part of my family. Remember those in prison as if you yourself are in prison with them. And also remember those who are mistreated, since you are in the body. And the idea is, a lot of the Stoics write about this around the first century time of writing. There's a really funny guy. This is not exactly his example, but imagine I have a hammer or something heavy, and I drop it and it lands on my toe. And my response is, ouch, that really hurt my toe. No, I just dropped something heavy on my toe. There's a full body response to that. Ah! All of me responds to what just happened to my toe. That's what we're talking about right now. You're in prison, and all of the rest of us are as if we are in prison with you. You're suffering or hurting, and so we're going to do that with you. Okay, so here are my 2 things for you, real quick. If you want to turn over to Job chapter 2, that's going to be our next text. Job chapter 2. I want to get there before I start talking, because I would like to make sure that you get this one. This is the one thing that I want you to get. All right, ready? Everybody done turning? Number 1, suffering together with family. Number 1, only got 2 things for you. This is the first one. Don't miss this one. Number 1, you cannot mess this one up. We have to get it right. There's no wiggle room here. Sometimes there's no wiggle room. You have to get this one right. How many times have you... I wish I didn't have to say this, because, this is mine. How many times has somebody said to you, I am experiencing some kind of suffering, I lost my baby, I lost my parent, I lost my husband, I lost my wife, I lost my job, there's some sort of sickness that has afflicted me or my family. I'm in the middle of some sort of situation, and we're talking, and the sentence is, and nobody from church even asked me about it. You ever done that? Anybody ever been in that situation? And it's just like somebody just took a knife right to my heart and said, you had one job. Like your job is to suffer with this person. You had one job, and you couldn't be bothered to go with them. They're walking through the fire. You can't mess this one up. There's a story that pops into my head whenever I think about this one. I think most of us have talked about this already, but one of the things that I do at home is I am a chaplain for our local police department. And there's some different things that go along with that, but one of the things that happens with that is I get called to the nasty calls. Most of us would be like, most calls are nasty calls. There are nasty calls. And that's when they call me. And my job is to support the officers, but you will probably appreciate this. We just have come to an agreement. The way that I can support the officers is you can stay outside and I'll deal with the family. Everybody wins, So I got a nasty call. There was a girl who this is August, she was about ready to start her senior year of high school. And her boyfriend broke up with her that morning. So she went home and she went upstairs and got the gun out of her dad's dresser and went into the bathtub and shot herself in the head. That's a nasty call. That's what I'm talking about. Like that will mess anybody up. And so I get called, I show up, officers go outside, I come in, I'm working with the family right now. And one of the first things that I always ask, because this is what I would expect you to do for me. Like this is my language. I come in, I say, oh, write this down. I said there's only 2 things for you to remember in this lesson. It would be a really good idea for you to remember this. We'll talk about this in a minute. But these are the words that you say. Just stick them in your pocket and remember these words. I'm really sorry that this is happening to you. That's all you have to say. I'm sorry, but also I understand that something has happened to you. You're a victim. I'm really sorry that this is happening to you. So in our circle, I come in, and the very first thing that I say to you is, we need to get in touch with your church family. Like, who do I need to call to activate the family? That's our first response, right? That's the first thing. And I know that's not true for everybody, but sometimes it is. And so I go in and I say, okay, are you a part of a church? Yes, we go to the St. Louis Family Church. Okay. Give me just a couple minutes. Is it okay with you if I go outside and I reach out to this church and activate the church family and all? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And so I go outside and I look up the number and I call St. Louis Family Church. And it's 5:10. So business hours are over. They closed 10 minutes ago. Already I'm mad about this. And so I call the number and I get sent to an answering service and I say, hey, listen, these are your members and this thing has happened to them and I need to let you know so you can do the things that you do. And they say, okay, this is the first thing that made me mad. Okay, so are you going to need somebody from the pastoral staff to call you back tonight? And I'm like, yeah, that would be nice. And so, okay, I'll have someone call you back. And so I went, and it's like 30 minutes before somebody can get on the phone and call me back, and Pastor, whatever his name is, calls me back, and he says, okay, yeah, I know. The lady told me who you're calling about. I know who you're talking about. I've looked them up. I understand their family, and they're part of this church and all of this. And yeah, tell me what's going on. I told him what's going on. He goes, okay. And do you think that they're going to need someone to come out there tonight? And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. And like, who would even say something like this? So this is a part of your number 1. Write this down. and don't mess it up. You can't mess this one up. Always show up. Always. Always. Never fail. You can't not show up. It's not on the table. This is something that we have to do, and we have to get it right, and we can't mess this one up. You always have to show up. Always. And the sooner the better. And the family's going to say, no, we don't want to talk right now. Ignore them. Yes, they do. Well, maybe they don't want to talk. You still need to show up. We do. Sit on the front porch in front of their house. You don't even have to go in, but show up. You have to show up. So here's where I go. I'm in Job chapter 2 right now, and I'm going to start in verse 11. I have a thing, you already know this about me, that I'm wired weird, and it's really uncomfortable for lots of people. When Becky cries, she gets upset about something, here's what I do. Everything gets stiff. Oh no, she's crying again. And so, we've been married, I think it's been 24 years is what we figured out. Something like that. So we've been married for the first chunk of our, 20 years of marriage. And this is what I do. I'm not joking. It's worse. She's my wife. Whenever you're talking to somebody at church, a woman often, and she starts crying, it's just like, you know, like,
I'm that girl.
yeah. Here's the thing. If you're like me, imagine, I don't know if this is a woman thing. I do imagine that probably there's some men. Okay, somebody just had something really bad happen and I'm going to show up because I know this is important. But I'm also terrified because I don't have any idea what I'm going to say. What am I going to do right now? What am I going to say? And this is the thing that I want you to know. Job chapter 2, starting in verse 11. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that had come upon him, they came, each from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. And they made an appointment together to come and to show sympathy and comfort him. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads toward heaven. That verse is this. You're in prison, and it's as if I'm in prison with you. You're just in the depths of despair right now, and I'm going to mourn and cry and put dust on my head because I'm with you. We're together on this. And then I want you to notice this. This is really important. Verse 13. And they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. And the thing that I would really like for you to appreciate about this situation, if you know the rest of the book of Job, it was when they opened their mouth and started talking that they created problems, But while they were there, they showed up and they sat with their brother, their friend, and they cried with him. I don't know what to say. Fine, then don't say anything. But they showed up, is the point. You have to show up, and you can't mess this one up. We cannot mess this one up. I can't emphasize that enough, because we will really create harm in other people's souls if we mess this one up. It's something that you need to remember. We always show up. And if you don't know what to say, it's fine. Just don't say anything. But you have to show up. But also, I'm really sorry this is happening to you. Stick that one in your pocket. Okay, that's number 1. I said I had 2 things for you. Let's do number 2 and then we'll be done. Go over to 1 Kings chapter 19. I did this one, by the way, recently. In 2022, that's when Dad found out that he had esophageal cancer. And Mom called and said, hey, we just just got the call that nobody wants to get, the bad one. And she said, I just wanted to let you guys know, it's me and my sister. I just wanted to let you guys know, but I don't really want to talk about it right now. I'd just like to have some space. And Stacy is my sister. Stacy called me and she said, what do you think I should do? And I said, go. I'm 4 hours away. She's 15 minutes away. I said, go. But she said she didn't want me to. Go. Like, always. Always. I'll give you 1,000 stories about this. There's a family from church whose dad was living with the wife's dad was living with them, and he fell and passed away. And the email went out to the church, and it said, please no calls or visitors. We don't. And I called one of the elders, and I said, hey, let's go. But they said, no. Please hear this one thing. Always show up. Always. Okay, number two. Number two, we talked about what is my responsibility when somebody else in my family is suffering. We got that. Number two is when you are the one who is suffering. When it's your turn to walk through the fire. This is what I want you to write down, and this is what I want you to remember. You don't have to be alone. If you feel alone and you're suffering in silence by yourself, and you feel like nobody knows and nobody cares, it doesn't have to be that way. I've made plenty of mistakes, and I'm telling you these things from the mistakes and the bad experiences that I've made, and said, please let's not make those anymore. Some of us are going to make mistakes, and I know it's hurtful to you, but this is what I want you to know, and I know this church family well enough to say this confidently. You don't have to suffer by yourself. If you feel alone and you're suffering alone, it doesn't have to be that way. 1 Kings 19, starting in verse 14, this is the story of Elijah when Jezebel says, I'm going to kill that guy. And so he runs for his life. And here is his suffering. 1 Kings 19 and verse 14, he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So verse 18, he was wrong. He felt alone. Talk about walking through the fire. I mean, figuratively speaking, it's not as if he's walking through the fire. It's that if he stops walking and he gets caught, he's going to get thrown into the fire, like actually get killed. And his response is, I'm the only one left right now. That's the thing that he complains about. I am alone in this situation. And what God points out to him is, number one, no, you are not. You're not. You feel like you're alone, but you're not. You're wrong about that. And then, so I guess we should read that verse 18. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Okay, so there's still people left. But look at verse 19. This is where the story kind of changes directions. And I think it's important to see this. Elijah's complaint is, God, I'm all alone in this horrible thing, and God's response is, I will give you a friend. So verse 19. So he departed from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. And if you want to keep moving, we're not going to do this in this lesson right now, but if you just keep rolling through this text, I think you're going to turn for like the next 4 chapters. And what you're going to see is that God gives Elijah another prophet, another person, another comforter. And all of this is in response to, I'm all by myself. And this text is saying to him, no, you are not. You're not. You might feel like it, but you're not. And I know that this is probably not the most sensitive way for me to say this, but this is how I talk to my family. And since these lessons are about family, let's talk like this. It may be that you need to put your big boy pants on and use your grown-up words. And say, hey, I'm having a really hard time right now. Can you please come over and help me? Because here's the reality. I'm not a mind reader. There are some things that I should get right, that I should know, but I'm not a mind reader. And if you're suffering alone, maybe it's because nobody knows. And so part of that is your responsibility. Hey, I'm really hurting right now. Can you help me out with that? And I just can't even imagine a scenario where somebody in this family is going to say, no, not today. I think I know better than that. So let's do one last thing, and then we'll wrap this up. Go to Matthew 26. This is how I want to finish. That sense of being alone is one of the themes that I see with Jesus in the very last minutes of his life. He legit experienced aloneness in several different ways. I just want to illustrate a couple of those with you. Matthew 26. It's kind of sounding like my voice is not going to make it to the end of this lesson. So how about if we don't actually read this text, but I'll assume that you know what we're talking about here. Matthew 26, verses 36 through 46. This is where Jesus says to his disciples, to his closest inner circle, the people who should be there for him the most, hey, my soul is really grieved right now. Come and pray with me. And they fall asleep. Okay, it's been a long day. Could happen to any of us. So he goes back to them and wakes them up and says, guys, would you please pray with me? Watch with me. Yes, got it. And they fall asleep. And he goes back to them a third time, and they're asleep again. And this is the thing that we're talking about right now. Jesus, the worst part of this is doing it alone, and even his closest inner circle can't, spend a couple hours with him. John chapter 16. No, how about this? Let's do Mark 14. That's the one I want to do. Mark 14 has a really short line. Mark 14 and verse 50. Jesus is betrayed by Judas. And remember everybody who said, though everybody else will leave you, I will never leave you. Wasn't just Peter who said it? They all said it. Jesus is betrayed and arrested. And look at verse 50. They all left him and fled. 7. And they all left him and fled. Think about that for a second. Like, here I am. Can't feel very good right now. And I look up, and what do I see? But everybody who's should be with me right now running away. I'm alone. You won't pray with me. You won't stay up with me. You won't suffer with me. You run away when I get arrested. Matthew 27 and verse 46. I'm not going to try and start a theology fight with you on this passage. Seems like that always happens. But you can't really ignore the words when Jesus was on the cross. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now, does that mean that Jesus was forsaken by God? I'm not even talking about that right now. But here he is, suffocating to death on a cross. Whether or not God has forsaken him, it's not really a hard stretch to imagine why he might feel that way. You know what I mean? In the moment. And all of these things, and more, point us to the reality that Jesus is suffering alone. And the thing that I want you to remember, I'm still on my second point here right now. If you're alone, you don't have to be. The thing that I want you to think about is that Jesus did what he did and suffered alone so that you don't have to. He did what he did in those circumstances in order to provide a gateway for us to be a part of the family so that when our turn to suffer happens, I've got you and you and you and you and you. And it's like Jesus, it's just one more example of Jesus saying, I'm going to do this this thing so you don't have to. So 2 things. Number 1, you have to show up and you can't mess it up. Number 2, if you're alone, you don't have to be. You might need to let us know, but you don't have to be alone in suffering. If you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, and at least this part of being a part of God's family sounds like something that you might like to think about a little bit more, we'd like to talk with you about that. If you already know that you want to be a part of the family and you know how to do that, we would love to take the steps necessary for you to be born again into this family tonight, if necessary. Let us know as together we stand and sing the invitation song.
Number 654. I traveled down a lonely road and no one seemed to care. The burden on my weary back had bowed me to despair. I oft complained to Jesus how folks were treating me, and then I heard him say so tenderly, my feet were also weary upon the Calvary road. The cross became so heavy, I fell beneath the load. Be faithful, weary pilgrim, the morning I can see. Just lift your cross and follow close to me. I work so hard for Jesus, I often boast and say, I've sacrificed a lot of things to walk the narrow way. I gave up fame and fortune, I'm worth a lot to thee. And then I hear him gently say to me, I left the throne of glory and counted it but loss. My hands were nailed in anger upon a cruel cross. But now we'll make the journey with your hand safe in mine. So lift your cross and follow close to me. Oh Jesus, if I die upon a foreign field someday, would be no more than love demands, no less could I repay. No greater love hath mortal man than for a friend to die. These are the words he gently spoke to me. If just a cup of water I place within your hand, then just a cup of water is all that I demand. But if by death to living they can thy glory see, I'll take my cross and follow close to thee.
Thank you, brother. Great lesson tonight. Come back tomorrow for the final installation, I guess, of the brotherly family love and so forth. And thank you. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all the many blessings you bestowed upon us. Father, we thank you for bringing us all safely here tonight to hear Brother Ryan, and thank you for his message that he delivered to us. And help us all to remember to be there for each other. And that is one of our commandments is to help each other. Father, be with those of our congregation that are sick and that are unable to be with us tonight, and be with John and with Jessica as she still recovers from her surgery that she had. Father, bring us back at the next appointed time tomorrow night and help us to always remember that you're the most